The flames rose higher, licking at her bare feet as the crowd's chant grew deafening. "Burn the witch! Burn the witch!" They wanted her death, craved it like starving dogs over a bone. She'd committed no crime except existing. A woman too beautiful, too educated, too independent for their small minds to comprehend. As the fire caught the hem of her tattered dress, she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer not for salvation, but for the world to someday be kinder than this. Then, through the roar of flames and hatred, she heard boots striking, cobblestone, heavy, determined. When she opened her eyes, a man in noble's clothing was walking straight into the pyre, his hand extended toward hers. The morning had started like any other in the village of Ashford. Margaret had been grinding herbs in her cottage, preparing remedies for the sick when they came. 20 men with torches and accusations sharp as knives. "Witch!" They'd screamed, dragging her from her home. "You cursed Thomas Cooper's crops! You made Elizabeth Warren's baby come out twisted." It didn't matter that Thomas Cooper drank away his earnings instead of tending his fields, or that Elizabeth had fallen downstairs while heavy with child. They needed someone to blame for life's cruelties. And Margaret, unmarried, educated by traveling monks, skilled in healing arts, made a perfect target. The Duke of Ashford, Edmund Blackthorne, had been away when the hysteria began. He returned to find his village transformed into something from a nightmare. A mob gathered in the square around a hastily built pyre. His steward rushed to meet him. "Your Grace, thank God you've returned. The people, they've gone mad. They mean to execute Margaret Whitmore for witchcraft." Edmund's blood ran cold. He knew Margaret. 3 years ago, she'd saved his sister's life when fever nearly claimed her. Last winter, she'd tended to every sick child in the village, asking nothing in return. She was no more a witch than he was a saint. "On whose authority?" Edmund demanded. "Father Matthias says the church sanctions it. Says she's confessed." Confessed? Edmund knew what that meant. They'd tortured her until words meant nothing. He spurred his horse forward, but the crowd was too thick, too frenzied. By the time he pushed through, they'd already lit the flames. Margaret stood there, bound to the stake, her green eyes reflecting the fire, but not with fear, with resignation, with a sadness so profound it broke something inside him. "Stop this!" Edmund's voice boomed across the square. "I command you as Duke of this land, extinguish those flames." But Father Matthias stepped forward, his face twisted with righteous fury. "The Duke has no authority over matters of God. This woman has confessed to Congress with demons. She must burn! She was tortured!" Edmund shouted. "Any of you would confess to anything under— Are you defending witchcraft, Your Grace?" The priest's voice dripped with threat. "Perhaps you too have been bewitched by her unnatural beauty?" The crowd murmured. Edmund could feel the tide turning dangerous. In times of hysteria, even a duke could become a target. His own guards looked uncertain, hands on sword hilts but eyes darting between their lord and the mob. He had a choice. He could order his men to cut her down, trigger a battle that would divide his lands and possibly cost him everything. He could invoke ancient laws, demand trials, play political games while Margaret burned. Or he could do something no one would expect. Edmund dismounted. Without a word, he began walking toward the flames. "Your Grace," his captain called. "Don't—" But Edmund didn't stop. The heat hit him first, scorching and terrible. Then the smoke, filling his lungs with poison. The crowd fell silent, their chants dying in confusion and shock. A duke walking into fire. It defied all logic, all sense. Margaret's eyes widened as he drew near, flames now between them like a river of hell. "What are you doing?" She gasped, voice hoarse from smoke. "Something I should have done years ago," Edmund said. He reached through the flames and his hand found hers. Her fingers were small and cold despite the inferno. "Trust me." He drew his sword with his free hand, not to threaten but to cut her bonds. The rope fell away and he pulled her forward. Through the flames, his body shielding hers. His fine clothes caught fire. Pain screamed through his legs, his back. But he didn't let go. They emerged from the pyre together, both burning, both alive. Edmund threw her to the ground and rolled them both in the dirt, smothering the flames on their clothes and skin. His guards rushed forward with blankets, beating out the last of the fire. When the smoke cleared, Edmund stood, swaying but standing, with Margaret behind him. His clothes were ruined, his skin blistered, but his eyes blazed with something fiercer than any fire. "You call her a witch," he said, voice ragged but carrying across the now silent square. "You say she consorts with demons. Then explain to me how I walked through those flames and still live. Explain how she survives." He looked at Father Matthias. "Unless you believe God himself protected us?" The priest's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I'll tell you what Margaret Whitmore is," Edmund continued. "She's a healer who saved my sister when your prayers failed, Father. She's a woman who tends to the sick without payment. She's more Christian than any of you with your torches and your hate." "But someone started. "Would you like me to torture you until you confess to flying?" Edmund snapped. "I'll have you admitting you're the Queen of France within an hour." He turned in a slow circle, meeting eyes throughout the crowd. "Look at yourselves. Thomas Cooper, your crops failed because you planted in poorly drained soil. I warned you myself. Elizabeth Warren, your child was hurt because you fell. Grief and bad luck are not witchcraft. They're life." A woman in the crowd began to weep. Then another. The madness was breaking. "Go home," Edmund said quietly. "All of you, be ashamed. Pray for forgiveness, and never ever let me hear of anyone threatening this woman again." The crowd dispersed like morning fog, people slinking away with their torches extinguished and their heads bowed. Father Matthias stood alone for a moment. Then he too retreated into his church. Edmund's legs finally gave out. Margaret caught him, this burned and broken duke who'd walked through fire for her. "You fool," she whispered, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face. "You beautiful fool. You could have died." "So could you," he managed. That seemed rather more important. She laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was like sunlight after storm. "I need to tend these burns." "Yours are worse than mine." "I know a good healer," Edmund said. "I'm told she's a witch, but I don't much care." 6 months later, they married in the village square, the same square where they'd nearly died. The people came bearing gifts and apologies, and if some still whispered about witchcraft, they did so quietly and without malice. Margaret never forgot the sight of Edmund walking through flames to reach her. Edmund never forgot how she'd caught him when he fell. They'd both learned the same lesson in those terrible moments. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to walk through fire for someone else. Love, they discovered, was exactly that. A choice to burn, if necessary, rather than let another soul face the flames alone. And in a world that could be cruel and mad and merciless, that choice, made again each day in smaller, quieter ways, was the closest thing to magic either of them would ever need.